The day my own sister looked me in the eyes and denied everything, the world tilted on its axis. I remember the sterile smell of the hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of machines, a constant reminder of my mother's failing health, and the chilling calmness in my sister's voice as she uttered those words. They all watched, my father, my brother, even my supposed friends, their faces a blur of disappointment and judgment, their silence a deafening roar in my ears. But I said nothing. I just stared back, a storm brewing inside, a promise of retribution etched on my heart. If you have ever felt betrayed by your own blood, subscribe now. My name is Nora, and for years I was the dependable one, the quiet achiever, the family's rock. I worked tirelessly to build a life for myself, brick by brick, saving every penny, investing wisely, and always putting others before myself. My sister, Emily, on the other hand, was the free spirit, the charismatic charmer, the one who always seemed to land on her feet, no matter what chaos she left in her wake, and everyone seemed to adore her for it. I always covered for her, excused her behavior, and believed in her potential, even when she gave me every reason not to. I helped her get jobs, loaned her money I couldn't afford to lose, and listened patiently to her endless complaints about how unfair life was. I thought that's what sisters did, right? But little did I know that my kindness would be twisted into a weapon against me, that my trust would be shattered into a million pieces, and that the very foundation of my family would crumble before my eyes. It all started innocently enough, with a misplaced credit card, a forgotten password, and a series of small favors that I was too willing to grant. Emily needed help with the down payment for a condo. She explained tearfully how she had finally found the perfect place. She promised to pay back every cent. She needed a small loan to cover some unexpected expenses. She was starting a new business and just needed a little boost. Then she started asking for access to my accounts, claiming it was for tax purposes or to consolidate debts, always with a convincing story and a charming smile. And I, foolishly, obliged. I didn't want to believe my own sister was capable of such deception. I truly believed she would pay me back. I should have known better. The first red flag was subtle, a small charge on my credit card that I didn't recognize. When I confronted Emily, she dismissed it as a mistake, a simple error that she would take care of immediately. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But then came another charge, and another, each one larger and more suspicious than the last. Soon, my credit score plummeted, my accounts were drained, and I was drowning in debt, facing calls from collection agencies and threatening letters from banks. I knew something was terribly wrong.
I tried talking to my parents, explaining what was happening, but they brushed it off, accusing me of being paranoid, of being jealous of Emily's success. "She's your sister," they said. "You should be supporting her, not accusing her." They couldn't see what was happening. They were blinded by her charm, by her lies, by their own misguided sense of family loyalty. They told me to stay quiet, not to make a fuss. It would all work out. But it didn't. It got worse. Emily was living the high life, buying expensive cars, traveling the world, and flaunting her wealth on social media, all while I was struggling to make ends meet, working multiple jobs, and facing the very real possibility of losing everything I had worked for. It was a nightmare, and my family wanted me to stay silent. The person I trusted most was one of them, my brother, Mark. I found out later he had been helping Emily cover her tracks, providing her with inside information, and even forging my signature on certain documents. He was just as culpable, just as deceitful, and just as willing to watch me suffer. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air, struggling to comprehend the depth of their betrayal. They weren't just stealing my money, they were stealing my life, my future, my very identity. And they were doing it together. The hospital room became my second home, not just because of my mother's deteriorating condition, but because it was the only place I could find a semblance of peace, away from the constant barrage of debt collectors and the suffocating weight of my family's judgment. Sleepless nights were filled with calculations, desperate attempts to salvage what was left of my finances, and the gnawing realization that I was losing everything. Each phone call, each letter, each knock on the door chipped away at my resolve, leaving me feeling hollow and vulnerable. I tried to explain the situation to the banks, to the credit card companies, but they were unsympathetic, their voices cold and impersonal as they recited the terms of my agreements, reminding me of my obligations and threatening legal action. I felt trapped, suffocated by the consequences of my own naivete, by the betrayal of those I loved most. My health began to suffer. The stress manifested in migraines that blurred my vision and made it hard to concentrate. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame, a constant reminder of my dwindling resources. I tried to reach out to friends, seeking solace and support, but they seemed hesitant, unsure of how to respond to my predicament. Some offered empty platitudes, others simply avoided me altogether, their silence a stark reflection of my own isolation. They didn't understand. How could they? Unless they had been betrayed like this. Unless their family had turned against them.
I remember one particularly brutal day when the electricity was shut off in my apartment. I sat in the darkness, surrounded by stacks of unpaid bills, the silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of my mother's life support machine in the background. It felt like a cruel joke, a twisted parody of my life. I was supposed to be the strong one, the provider, the one who always had it together. But now I was powerless, helpless, watching everything I had worked for crumble around me. The shame was overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that threatened to consume me entirely. I considered confessing everything to my mother, hoping she would understand, hoping she would offer some words of comfort, some glimmer of hope. But she was too weak, too fragile, her mind clouded by medication and illness. I couldn't burden her with my problems, not when she was fighting her own battle for survival. So I remained silent, swallowing my pain and pretending that everything was okay, even as my world continued to unravel. The constant pressure began to affect my work. I made mistakes, missed deadlines, and struggled to focus, earning reprimands from my supervisor and jeopardizing my already precarious employment. I knew I was on thin ice, one wrong move away from losing my job, but I couldn't seem to pull myself together. The weight of my financial burdens, the emotional toll of my family's betrayal, and the sheer exhaustion of fighting a losing battle had taken their toll. I was running on fumes, desperately clinging to the hope that somehow things would get better. But deep down, I knew that I was headed for a breaking point, a moment of reckoning where I would have to confront the full extent of my loss and decide how to move forward. It was during one of those dark nights, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, that a new feeling began to emerge, a flicker of defiance, a spark of anger that slowly ignited into a burning flame of resolve. It wasn't enough to simply survive, I realized. I needed to fight back. I needed to expose the truth. I needed to make them pay for what they had done. That was when the idea of revenge began to take root, a seed of retribution planted in the fertile ground of my despair. My first attempt to seek justice through legal channels proved futile. I contacted a lawyer, hoping to file charges against Emily and Mark for fraud and theft, but I quickly learned that proving my case would be an uphill battle. The evidence was circumstantial, the documentation incomplete, and my family was unwilling to cooperate, choosing to protect their own rather than face the consequences of their actions. The lawyer explained that even if I managed to win, the legal fees would be astronomical, potentially leaving me even more deeply in debt. I felt defeated, crushed by the realization that the system was rigged against me, that the very institutions that were supposed to protect the innocent were powerless in the face of familial loyalty and deceit. That's when I realized the only way to get justice was to get it myself. They had played dirty, and now I would too. The old Nora was gone. The naive, trusting sister was dead. In her place was someone else, someone hardened by betrayal, fueled at anger, and determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The day I received the eviction notice felt like the final nail in the coffin. I remember staring at the crisp white paper, the official language blurring before my eyes, the weight of its message crushing me. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and the prospect of becoming homeless, of ending up on the streets, filled me with a terror I had never known before.
It wasn't just about losing my apartment. It was about losing everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, everything that defined me. The shame was unbearable, a constant gnawing feeling that eroded my self-worth and left me questioning my every decision. I packed my belongings into boxes, each item a painful reminder of my shattered dreams, my broken trust, and my lost future. The process was agonizing, a slow and deliberate dismantling of my life, a forced acceptance of my new reality. As I surveyed the empty apartment, stripped bare of its warmth and personality, I felt a profound sense of loss, a deep and inconsolable grief for the life that was now beyond my reach. The only thing left was a hollow ache. My mind raced, desperately searching for a solution, a way out, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But there was nothing. I was trapped, cornered, with no escape in sight. I thought about my mother, lying in the hospital bed, oblivious to my plight, and a wave of guilt washed over me. I was supposed to be taking care of her, providing for her, but instead, I was failing her, letting her down in her time of need. The weight of my responsibilities, the crushing burden of my failures, threatened to overwhelm me, to drag me down into an abyss of despair. Everything felt meaningless. That night, I sat alone in the hospital waiting room, the harsh fluorescent lights reflecting in my tear-filled eyes. The rhythmic beeping of the machines echoed in the sterile silence, a constant reminder of my mother's fragile grip on life and my own precarious existence. I felt numb, detached from reality, as if I were watching my life unfold from a distance, a tragic play with no redemption in sight. The faces of my family flickered through my mind, their expressions of judgment, their words of accusation, their unwavering loyalty to Emily and Mark. I felt a surge of anger, a burning resentment that threatened to consume me entirely. How could they do this to me? How could they betray me so easily, so callously? How could they stand by and watch me suffer, knowing that they were the cause of my pain? The injustice of it all was unbearable, a festering wound that refused to heal. I wanted to scream, to shout, to lash out at them, to make them feel the pain they had inflicted upon me. But I remained silent, clenching my fists, channeling my rage into a cold, hard knot of determination. I would not let them break me. I would not let them steal my life. I would not let them get away with what they had done. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, a nurse approached me, her voice soft and sympathetic. She informed me that my mother's condition had taken a turn for the worse, that she was slipping away, and that I should prepare myself for the inevitable. The news hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air, struggling to comprehend the finality of it all. My mother, the one person who had always been there for me, the one source of unconditional love and support in my life, was about to leave this world. The thought was unbearable, a gaping void that threatened to swallow me whole. I rushed to her bedside, my heart pounding in my chest, my vision blurred by tears. I took her hand, her skin frail and paper-thin, and I whispered words of love and gratitude, telling her how much she meant to me, how much I would miss her. She squeezed her hand weakly, her eyes fluttering open for a moment, a faint smile gracing her lips. And then, she was gone. The rhythmic beeping of the machines flatlined, the silence deafening, the finality of her passing crushing me with its weight. I had lost everything. My home, my family, my mother. I was alone. Utterly, completely alone. The world felt cold and empty, devoid of hope, devoid of meaning. I wanted to give up, to surrender to the darkness, to simply cease to exist. But something stopped me, a flicker of defiance, a spark of resolve that refused to be extinguished. I owed it to my mother to fight back, to reclaim my life, to expose the truth, and make those who had wronged me pay for their actions. That night, after the funeral, as everyone was patting me on the back and telling me, "It's going to be all right," I knew it wouldn't. But I also knew what I was going to do.
I went back to my empty apartment. The electricity was still off, so I lit some candles. The flickering light danced across the bare walls, illuminating the emptiness, the desolation, the utter ruin of my life. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of my past, and I made a decision. I would not let them win. I would not let them destroy me. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever before. The naive, trusting Nora was gone. In her place was a strategist, a planner, a warrior, ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I pulled out a notebook and a pen, and I began to write. I wrote down everything that had happened, every detail of Emily and Mark's betrayal, every lie they had told, every manipulation they had employed. I mapped out their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their hidden secrets. I analyzed their motives, their desires, their fears. And I began to formulate a plan, a meticulous, calculated plan for revenge. It would not be quick, it would not be easy, but it would be thorough, and it would be devastating. They had taken everything from me. Now it was my turn to take everything from them. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The notebook became my Bible, each page filled with meticulously crafted steps, potential pitfalls, and contingency plans. I knew I couldn't afford to make a single mistake. Emily and Mark were cunning, resourceful, and deeply entrenched in their web of lies. Taking them down would require precision, patience, and a willingness to play the long game. My initial focus was gathering evidence. I needed concrete proof of their fraud, something that would stand up in court, something that would expose their deceit to the world. I started by revisiting old emails, bank statements, and financial records, searching for any inconsistencies, any discrepancies, any clues that could lead me to the truth. It was a painstaking process, sifting through mountains of data, but I was relentless, driven by a burning desire to uncover their secrets. I remembered a conversation I had with Mark several months prior, a seemingly innocuous chat about my business finances. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, but now, in light of everything that had happened, his questions seemed pointed, almost predatory. I recalled him asking about my online banking passwords, my investment strategies, and my access to sensitive company documents. I shuddered, realizing that he had been gathering intelligence, laying the groundwork for his betrayal. I decided to focus on his digital footprint, hoping to find evidence of his involvement in Emily's schemes. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I invested in sophisticated data recovery software and began scouring his social media accounts, his email inboxes, and his online activity for any signs of wrongdoing. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but I refused to give up. One evening, while digging through Mark's old emails, I stumbled upon a series of encrypted messages exchanged between him and Emily. The subject lines were coded, the content indecipherable, but I knew instinctively that they held the key to unraveling their conspiracy. I spent weeks trying to crack the encryption, experimenting with different algorithms, consulting with online security experts, and poring over technical manuals. It was a frustrating and time-consuming process, but I was determined to break through their digital barrier. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I managed to decrypt one of the messages. It was a detailed financial report, outlining the flow of funds from my accounts to Emily's offshore holdings. The report included dates, amounts, and account numbers, providing irrefutable evidence of their fraudulent activities. I felt a surge of triumph, a sense of vindication that washed over me, confirming my suspicions and solidifying my resolve. I now had the ammunition I needed to take them down. But I knew it wasn't enough to simply possess the evidence. I needed to present it in a way that would be undeniable, irrefutable, and impossible to ignore. I contacted a forensic accountant, a specialist in uncovering financial crimes, and I shared my findings with her. She was impressed by the depth and breadth of my investigation, and she agreed to help me build a case against Emily and Mark. Together, we meticulously analyzed the financial records, tracing the money trail, identifying the shell corporations, and documenting the fraudulent transactions. The accountant helped me prepare a comprehensive report, summarizing our findings and presenting them in a clear and concise manner. The report was damning, painting a vivid picture of their deceit and greed. Simultaneously, I turned my attention to Emily's social media empire. Her carefully curated online persona was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion designed to mask her true nature. I decided to expose her hypocrisy, to reveal the truth behind her glamorous lifestyle, to show the world the woman she really was.
I started by documenting her lavish spending habits, her extravagant vacations, and her expensive purchases, contrasting them with her public image of a successful and self-made entrepreneur. I highlighted the inconsistencies in her story, the discrepancies in her claims, and the blatant lies she had told to her followers. I created a website, anonymously, where I posted my findings along with copies of the financial reports, the encrypted messages, and other incriminating evidence. I knew it was a risky move, potentially exposing myself to legal repercussions, but I was willing to take the chance. The truth needed to be told, and I was determined to be the one to tell it. As the website gained traction, I began receiving messages from other victims of Emily's scams, people who had been defrauded, exploited, and betrayed by her. Their stories were heartbreaking, filled with tales of financial ruin, emotional distress, and shattered dreams. I realized that I wasn't alone in my suffering, that there were others who had been hurt by Emily's greed and deceit. I decided to amplify their voices, to share their stories on my website, to create a platform for them to speak out and seek justice. The website became a rallying point for those who had been wronged by Emily, a community of survivors united by their shared experience of betrayal.
The closer I got to exposing Emily and Mark, the more paranoid I became. I knew they were watching me, monitoring my activities, and waiting for an opportunity to strike back. I took precautions to protect myself, changing my passwords, securing my devices, and avoiding suspicious situations. I installed surveillance cameras in my apartment, monitoring the entrances and exits, and I kept a detailed log of all my interactions with Emily and Mark. I knew they were capable of anything, and I wasn't willing to take any chances. One evening, as I was working on my website, I received a threatening message from an anonymous sender. The message warned me to stop my investigation, to take down the website, and to leave Emily and Mark alone. It was a clear attempt to intimidate me, to scare me into silence. But it had the opposite effect. It only strengthened my resolve, fueling my determination to expose their crimes. I refused to be silenced. I refused to be intimidated. I would not back down. I knew that I was on the right track, that I was getting close to the truth, and that they were desperate to stop me. That was all the confirmation I needed. The day they tried to silence me was the day they sealed their fate. The threatening message was sent from a burner email, impossible to trace. But within the garbled threats, a key phrase stood out, a reference to my mother's jewelry, specifically a necklace I thought was lost years ago. The necklace wasn't just some trinket. It contained a flash drive hidden within the clasp. On that drive was evidence that Emily's self-made empire was built on a foundation of lies, stolen ideas, and the ruined careers of countless aspiring influencers she had used and discarded like trash. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They knew I had it, and they were terrified. Their weakness wasn't their money or their connections. It was their fear of exposure, their desperate need to protect the carefully constructed image they had cultivated for so long. I knew I had to protect that necklace. It was my leverage, my insurance, my ticket to finally bringing them down. I decided to use their fear against them, to lure them into a trap they couldn't escape. I crafted a response to the anonymous message, playing on their paranoia, hinting that I was ready to negotiate, that I was willing to trade the necklace for my peace of mind. I suggested a meeting, a discreet location far from the prying eyes of their social circle, a place where we could discuss terms. I chose an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a desolate and isolated location with limited access and no surveillance cameras. It was the perfect setting for a confrontation, a place where I could control the narrative and dictate the terms. The days leading up to the meeting were a blur of frantic preparations. I reached out to a former colleague, a tech whiz named Ben, who I knew I could trust. I told him everything, laying out the details of Emily and Mark's scheme, sharing the evidence I had gathered, and explaining my plan for revenge. Ben was initially hesitant, wary of getting involved in such a dangerous situation. But when he saw the pain in my eyes, the determination in my voice, he agreed to help. He installed a series of hidden cameras and microphones throughout the warehouse, creating a network of surveillance that would capture every word, every action, every moment of the meeting. He also set up a remote server where the footage would be streamed live, ensuring that there would be a record of everything that transpired, even if something went wrong. I also contacted a lawyer, a seasoned professional who specialized in fraud and corporate crime. I briefed her on the details of the case, providing her with copies of the financial reports, the encrypted messages, and the evidence I had recovered from the necklace. She was confident that we had a strong case, but she cautioned me to be careful,
warning me that Emily and Mark were likely to resort to desperate measures to protect themselves. She advised me to document everything, to avoid any direct confrontation, and to let the legal system handle the situation. But I knew that I couldn't rely solely on the law. I needed to take matters into my own hands, to ensure that justice was served, not just legally, but morally. The night of the meeting arrived, cloaked in a veil of tension and anticipation. As I drove to the warehouse, my hands gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounded in my chest, my mind raced with a million different scenarios. I knew that I was walking into a potentially dangerous situation, but I was prepared to face whatever came my way. I arrived at the warehouse early, parking my car a safe distance away and surveying the surroundings. The building was derelict, its windows boarded up, its walls covered in graffiti. The only sound was the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls, creating an eerie and unsettling atmosphere. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and approached the entrance. I pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped inside. The warehouse was dark and cavernous, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. The only light came from the moon filtering through the gaps in the roof, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. I walked slowly and deliberately, my senses on high alert, listening for any sign of movement, any indication that I was not alone. As I reached the center of the warehouse, I saw them. Emily and Mark stood silhouetted against the moonlight, their faces grim, their eyes fixed on me. The game had begun. "So glad you could make it, Nora," Emily said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve." I just smirked.
Wouldn't miss it for the world. I brought what you wanted. Do you have what I want? Mark stepped forward, his expression menacing. Let's see the necklace first. I held up my hand. Not so fast. I have some demands first. The air crackled with tension. The final act was about to begin. And little did they know, they were walking directly into my trap. The exact day they thought they had me cornered, I was about to unleash hell. Not so fast. I have some demands first. I let the words hang in the air, watching their faces contort with a mixture of anger and desperation. Emily's perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed, and Mark's jaw clenched. Demands? You're in no position to make demands, Mark sneered, taking another step closer. I held my ground, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Oh, I think I am. You see, I know everything. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the stolen ideas, and the countless lives you have ruined in your relentless pursuit of wealth and fame. Emily's eyes widened in panic, and she shot a quick glance at Mark. He remained stoic, but I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. You're bluffing, Emily spat, trying to regain her composure. You have nothing. I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the warehouse. Don't I? Let's just say I have a few friends in high places, people who are very interested in your activities. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. This contains all the evidence. Every email, every transaction, every lie. I've already sent copies to the authorities, to the media, and to a few very influential people who are not particularly fond of you. The color drained from Emily's face, and she stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark lunged towards me, his eyes filled with rage. You little. Before he could reach me, a series of blinding lights flooded the warehouse, then had activated the surveillance system, illuminating every corner of the space. Smile, Mark. You're on camera, I said, my voice dripping with satisfaction. He froze, his face contorted in a mask of fury and defeat. What is this? Emily stammered, her voice barely a whisper. This is your reckoning, I replied, my voice ringing with conviction. This is the moment when all your lies unravel, when all your secrets are exposed. This is the day you lose everything. I pressed a button on a remote control, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. On the screen, a video began to play. It was a compilation of Emily's public appearances, her interviews, her social media posts, interspersed with clips of the financial reports, the encrypted messages, and the testimonies of her victims. The video was a devastating indictment of her character, exposing her hypocrisy and revealing the true extent of her deceit. As the video played, I watched their faces crumble. Emily's carefully constructed facade shattered, revealing the insecure, grasping woman beneath. Mark's arrogance evaporated, replaced by a look of utter despair. They knew they were finished. The police arrived moments later, sirens blaring, lights flashing. They swarmed the warehouse, arresting Emily and Mark and taking them into custody. As they were led away in handcuffs, Emily turned to me, her eyes filled with hatred. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. I simply smiled. The fallout was swift and brutal. Emily's social media empire imploded. Her followers deserted her in droves, her sponsors abandoned her, and her reputation was ruined beyond repair. She was ostracized by her peers, ridiculed by the media, and vilified by the public. Mark lost his job, his friends, and his fortune. He was shunned by his community and faced the prospect of spending many years behind bars. The authorities seized their assets, their homes, and their businesses. Everything they had worked so hard to build was gone, reduced to ashes. The victims of their schemes rejoiced, finally seeing justice served after years of suffering. Their stories were amplified, their voices were heard, and their wounds began to heal. As for me, I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over me. I had achieved my goal. I had exposed their lies, avenged their betrayals, and brought them to justice. It wasn't easy. It came at a great cost, but it was necessary. I had to protect myself. I had to save myself. I had to reclaim my life. The necklace was returned to my mother, the flash drive a haunting reminder of what I had survived. I deleted the website, wanting no more contact with that chapter of my life. I rebuilt my life, stronger and more resilient than before. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my relationships, and to never let anyone take advantage of me again. The scars of betrayal remained, but they served as a reminder of my strength, my courage, and my unwavering determination to overcome adversity. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a survival mechanism, a way to protect yourself from those who seek to do you harm. It's not about hatred or malice. It's about justice. It's about holding people accountable for their actions. It's about reclaiming your power and taking back control of your life. They lost everything. I just smiled. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice.